Good morning. Good morning. Well, I guess I was in one of those moods when I wrote this. I have a friend, and you know who you are, who won't like this at all. Not that it's a bad book, not at all. I think it's a good one, but it's one of those that I guess I wanted to test myself. Perhaps that's why it's set in Torquay. Rest in peace, Agatha. For those who are interested, I will put up on my posts a map of the relationship between the characters, and that might help should you wish to follow it. But in the meantime, this is what it's basically about. The narrative follows Dr. April Fox, who returns to the coastal town of Torquay after a suspicious suicide of her father. She employs a private investigator, Richard Cropper, to uncover a complex. I say that with a tongue in cheek. A complex web of illegal bootlegging and blackmail involving the local vicar. What have I got against vicars? And a rival funeral director. Their investigation reveals that the town's respectable surface masks pervasive infidelity and long-buried family secrets. A biological mother of both Dr. Fox and the wealthy heiress Prudence Whitaker. The story concludes with the legal collapse of the corrupt local leadership and the reconciliation of the separate family members. These excerpts illustrate a dramatic transition from Victorian social rigidities to the harsh realities of post-war English life. It is a complicated novel, and a certain friend of mine will not enjoy it. I'm smiling when I think of her face. But there you go. Lies, Fidelity, and I can't think of what the novel's called now. Anywho, here it is. It's, I think it was written about 2014. It is a complex novel, so you have to keep your wits about you. But as I say, there is a diagram now going up. It went up yesterday, I think, or today, yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. I don't know. Illustrating the complex relationships between all the characters. But as you read it, it's if you keep your wits about you, it should be fairly self-evident. Enjoy.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking one of our most unusual assignments yet. We're swapping the predictable grime and chaos of the metropolis for the salty, seemingly innocent air of the British coast.
Specifically, Torquay in Devon.
Exactly. A town famed for its innocent charm, its donkey rides, and its promise of the perfect, polite family holiday in the 1950s.
But what our sources reveal is a world that is, well, it's far more labyrinthine than any concrete jungle we've ever explored.
It really is. Under that polite veneer, we found a horrifying maze of long-fermenting secrets, shocking financial scams, pervasive blackmail, and just dangerous criminal activity.
That's absolutely right. And the fuse for this whole explosion was lit by one young woman who just refused to accept the easy answer.
Dr. April Fox.
Dr. April Fox. We were tackling a stack of complex documents, research notes, witness accounts, all centered on her. She just refused to believe the official verdict on her adoptive father's tragic and violent suicide.
So our mission today is, it's a critical one.
It is. We have to perform what amounts to a forensic genealogy of an entire insular community. We have to connect these seemingly disparate events.
A local doctor's death, fierce business rivalries in the funeral business.
An illegal poisonous liquor operation, and a staggering amount of shocking infidelity. We have to weave all of that into one single, cohesive, and frankly explosive narrative.
And what makes this so challenging, aside from just the sheer number of characters involved, is that Torquay is, by its nature, an insular place.
Yeah.
It's a community where everyone believes they know everyone else's business, but, only on the surface.
Right, so we have to become the impartial outsider, meticulously sifting through decades of communal rot, local gossip, and half-truths to find the core crimes that led a good man to his death.
The story truly begins with Dr. April Fox herself. She returns to Torquay after her adoptive father, Dr. Edmund Fox, commits suicide.
And it was a violent, grotesque scene. A shotgun in his own surgery. The official verdict was just stamped and filed away. Unexplained suicide.
But April, a young doctor herself, inherited her father's stamina and, crucially, his naturally curious mind.
She just had this profound sense that there was a malignant coercion at play. Something that had cornered and crushed her father, forcing his hand. She simply could not reconcile the man she knew with the desperate act reported by the police.
So she looks around her community, realizes she can't trust the local constabulary or the gossip chain.
And she decides to import her own truth finder.
She hires a private investigator, a total stranger, to untangle the knot of Torquay's toxic tides.
And that outsider, Mr. Cropper, he immediately becomes our guide into this world. April Fox knew she needed a man with no history, no family ties, and absolutely no preconceptions about this seaside resort.
She finds a private investigator from London, a man who seems to be forged by sheer endurance.
Yeah, his physical presence alone tells you he's lived a hard life. He walks with a pronounced limp, relying heavily on a sturdy cane.
His right leg was amputated above the knee in late 1949.
Right, and this wasn't from a sudden trauma. This was the result of 5 years of agonizing physical pain from war injuries he got in France. He lived with that pain before finally consenting to the amputation.
That history is vital. It tells us he's a man accustomed to long-term suffering and making difficult final choices.
And the injuries didn't stop there. The same explosion that damaged his leg also robbed him of his right eye.
Oh, wow.
An army surgeon had to remove a 6-inch splinter of wood from his orbital socket, and the eye went with it. He now wears a disconcerting glass eye.
So you couple that with his signature black trilby hat, and this is a man who absolutely just does not blend in.
Not at all.
Yeah.
He stands out. And yet, April chose him specifically because his physical uniqueness was better than the anonymity of a local who could be easily compromised.
What's fascinating and what Cropper uses to his advantage is his cover. He couldn't just arrive and start asking questions. His official identity in Torquay was highly specific. It was designed to appeal to the town's current economic climate.
He was a wealthy painter and decorator from London. He'd made a small pile, as he put it, and was looking to invest and retire in the area, combining pleasure with, future business.
Which gave him the perfect alibi.
The perfect alibi. He could stroll about with his old tin leg, as he sometimes called it, and poke his nose into property sales, business dealings, local pubs.
Just asking general questions without raising suspicion that he was a detective.
Exactly. He could pose as a wealthy, curious tourist amidst the huge summer influx. Initially, Cropper really appreciated the paid holiday. He even noted how beautiful the Devon countryside was compared to the unutterable and overwhelming nest of villains he usually dealt with in East London.
He saw it as a brief, pleasant interlude.
He did.
And we really need to understand the town itself because the contrast is the first major clue here.
It is. April, having grown up there, she describes the town as having a genus-faced population.
Okay, what does she mean by that?
Well, on one side, you have this massive influx of tourists in the mid-1950s. The exhausted but excited city boys and girls who have never seen the sea before.
They're just concerned with the next donkey ride, the pinball machines, getting sunburnt. They are the distraction, the noise.
Exactly. But then you have the hidden side of Torquay, the quiet, offbeat footpaths, the deep, misty forests, and the secrets of nature that April's adoptive father, Dr. Edmund Fox, loved to explore.
So this duality, the shiny tourist facade masking deep, old, and dark secrets, that's what Cropper eventually found so compelling.
Right. The town's economy had shifted entirely away from just fishing and agriculture. It was now a fashionable seaside resort driven by leisure and new money, and that shift was causing a lot of friction.
And April, she wasted no time focusing Cropper's attention. She had her suspicions, confirmed by little things, like checking the local newspaper for mentions of her father.
And she immediately pushed Cropper toward two key figures she believed were involved in whatever pressure led to her father's suicide.
The first figure was Mr. Reddaway.
The owner of Reddaway Funeral Home. He was absolutely old school, a traditionalist who openly opposed the modern concept of cremation. He was clinging desperately to the ancient, respectable burial rites.
And crucially, he was struggling financially.
Oh, massively. The sources indicate unpaid bills spanning nearly 2 months. And most tellingly, he couldn't afford to bring in the vet for his two sick Belgian black horses, Charlie and Tilly.
And they were essential to his trade.
They were.
April's intuition about him was strong. She intensely disliked him and felt he had some unspecified holdover dad.
Which is the key question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Why would a struggling funeral director have power over a respected local doctor?
Exactly. And Reddaway's closest associate was the second major suspect.
Reverend Joshua Hardy, the local vicar.
They were almost inseparable. They were regularly seen drinking together in the snug of the hole-in-the-wall pub.
So Cropper realized immediately that his task wasn't just to look for a financial motive, but a criminal one.
Right, because whatever connected a failing funeral director and a man of the cloth?
It was highly unlikely to be purely spiritual or legitimate.
Okay, let's take a deep breath here because we're about to jump into the very dark heart of Torquay's criminality. The still operation is what connects these two men, and it quickly shows Cropper that the seaside town is far from tranquil.
Let's unpack this core connection because it immediately reveals the corruption that was just festering beneath the town's seaside facade. Reddaway and Reverend Hardy were operating a highly illegal still.
And this wasn't a small-time bootlegging hobby.
No, not at all. They were producing high-proof alcohol, approximately 120 proof. The source notes emphasize this was dangerously volatile and harsh, likely contaminated or, improperly filtered.
And this operation wasn't recent, was it?
No, it began during the Second World War, so it had been a continuous profitable enterprise for well over a decade.
Wait, how did a funeral director and a vicar manage to successfully run a major illegal alcohol operation for so long in an ostensibly quiet, respectable, small community? Surely the authorities would notice something.
That's the key to small-town corruption. You have a network and a trusted facade. They utilized their positions. As a funeral director, Reddaway had access to places and means of transport, like the funeral hearse.
Things that were unlikely to be searched or questioned.
Exactly. And Hardy, the vicar, held a position of trust that made him untouchable in the eyes of the general public. They maintained absolute secrecy.
And the liquor itself, where was it going?
It was supplied and distributed through 4 specific local public houses. This arrangement allowed them to push the product discreetly into the community. The sources mentioned that the local police eventually cautioned and held these 4 licensees.
But only after the whole operation was exposed.
Right. I mean, think about the hypocrisy, the dark irony here. The funeral director and the vicar are actively poisoning their own community with this illegal, dangerous brew.
Securing their own wealth by undermining public health, all while simultaneously offering spiritual and physical comfort to the victims and their grieving families.
It's a profound moral rot.
It really is. So the still operation is the foundation of their partnership, but their antagonism with the outside world revolved around their professional lives. This brings us to their primary business rival.
Ibiasif Quants.
Ibiasif Quants.
Quants represented everything Reddaway hated. He owned the new, modern Quants crematoriums. This was a groundbreaking, financially successful business that saw cremation as the future, directly challenging Reddaway's traditional, struggling burial model.
And Quants himself was described as a smooth one.
Yeah, radiating success with whiter-than-white Harley Street teeth, possessing a strong, modern profile. He embodied the new economic order of Torquay.
Reddaway's contempt for Quants was legendary.
Oh, it was. Cropper personally witnessed their tension, and it escalated into public displays, including a full-blown contemptuous shouting match in Bert's grocery store.
Confirmed by Mrs. Reddaway.
That's right. Reddaway viewed Quants as destroying the sanctity of a respectable profession.
But our deep dive reveals the rivalry was rooted in something much deeper and more personal than just money or tradition.
Much deeper. Quants had a secret, intense motive for settling in Torquay. And it wasn't just to dominate the funeral market. Cropper uncovered that EBSF Quants was, in fact, the estranged, slightly older brother of
Alice Reddaway.
Alice Reddaway, Ken Reddaway's unhappy wife.
So the competition was family warfare in disguise.
Precisely. Quance and Alice recognized each other immediately when they first encountered one another at the Hole-in-the-Wall pub. They kept this connection an absolute secret from Ken Reddaway.
Which placed Alice in an impossible position.
Absolutely. Watching her estranged brother intentionally set up shop to financially destroy her husband. Quance, having escaped his own London past, was determined to be Reddaway's professional destroyer.
Okay, so now we have a clear picture of the criminal and professional feuds. But the core tragedy of this town rests on the third leg of this stool. The extreme vulnerability and manipulation of the vicar's wife, Mary Hardy.
We really need to slow down here and understand her path.
I agree.
Mary Clegg, as she was known then, she suffered a devastating, publicly known tragedy. She lost her adopted parents in a high-profile, catastrophic lifeboat accident that remained a local talking point for years.
And she was left distraught, emotionally vulnerable, and financially precarious at just 19 years old.
And who swoops in but Reverend Hardy, a bachelor twice her age, who saw not a person to comfort, but an opportunity to exploit.
That level of calculated manipulation it speaks volumes about his character. How did he gain the leverage to marry her?
He used his office. Hardy, through access to the parish register's records, Cropper would later confirm were just kept haphazardly at the church, allowing for easy, unsupervised research.
He finds her secret.
He discovered Mary's life-altering secret. She was adopted, and her biological father was none other than Kenneth Reddaway, the funeral director.
This is a huge revelation. We need to make sure the listener grasps this connection immediately. Mary Hardy, the vicar's wife, is biologically Ken Reddaway's illegitimate child.
Correct. And Hardy leveraged this fact instantly. His threat was clear. He would expose Reddaway's premarital illegitimacy. He claimed this scandal would not only ruin Reddaway's fragile reputation and company,
but it would utterly destroy him professionally in early 20th century country life.
Right.
But wait, why would Mary, who barely knew her biological father, agree to ruin her own life just to protect Reddaway's reputation?
Because Reddaway had been a surrogate father figure to her adopted parents. She felt this profound, misplaced loyalty to the man who was, in her mind, her adopted family's oldest friend.
So she agreed to marry the monstrous vicar to keep the secret hidden.
She did. And Hardy immediately seized her house and her life savings, justifying the act by claiming a married woman in the 1950s had no need for her own bank accounts.
The source material paints just a heartbreaking picture of her descent.
It does.
She transitioned from a perky, bonny lass who was full of the joys of spring to a fawning creature who essentially gave up on life.
We see the external signs of her inner despair. Wearing dowdy, out-of-date clothes, resigning from her social life, cutting contact with the Women's Institute.
Even giving up small personal indulgences like visiting her hair salon or wearing earrings. She was, as the source describes, horsewhipped into a shadow of her former self.
That psychological pressure, that complete void of affection and identity, it drove her to seek refuge and validation outside of her marriage.
And that's where the web of secrets becomes truly complex and honestly devastatingly incestuous.
Her primary lover was Crispin Curvey, Reddaway's stonemason.
Curvey was notoriously handsome but had a shady past. He'd recently served a year in prison for fraud before Reddaway hired him for the undeniable quality of his stone-cutting work.
And their assignation spot was deeply symbolic. A centuries-old, secluded oak tree in Little Cockington Wood, only reachable through a thick layer of brambles, symbolizing the difficulty and danger of their hidden relationship.
And Mary wasn't monogamous in her desperation.
No. Her secondary affair was with EBSF Quance, the crematorium owner. They met in secret in the greenhouse at the vicarage.
A supremely dangerous location given Hardy's presence.
Extremely. And here is the layer of terrible irony we have to underscore. Mary was sleeping with Quance, who, as we just established, is the estranged brother of Alice Reddaway. This makes Quance Mary's biological father's brother-in-law.
The family tree is getting horribly knotted, but the rot continued even among the staff.
Henry Taylor, the older mortuary attendant at Reddaway's, was utterly obsessed with Mary. The sources suggest he had this sickly infatuation, constantly hovering around her, offering inane small talk.
And sometimes, horrifyingly, describing the decaying corpses in the mortuary to her distress.
Awful. Taylor recognized that Crispin Curvey was getting the affection he desired from Mary, and his adoration quickly soured into intense jealousy.
This led to an attempt at blackmail, but not for money or even to expose the affair publicly.
No. Taylor tried to blackmail Curvey purely to gain sexual access to Mary himself.
That is an astonishing level of entitlement and pathology. He told Curvey he knew about the assignations and threatened to expose things that could upset a few people if Curvey didn't actively encourage Mary's attention toward him.
Curvey's response was brutal and decisive. He didn't debate or reason. He violently punched the older man, knocking him unconscious for a few brief, crucial seconds.
Then he sat on Taylor's chest and grasped his neck.
Yeah. From that moment, Taylor realized Curvey was deeply committed to Mary, that he had stuck up for her. Taylor's feelings morphed again into a mix of bitter resentment for Curvey and a continued secret admiration for Mary's figure.
This small event, the brutal fight, it just demonstrates how much latent violence and repressed emotion was simmering beneath Torquay's surface, all thanks to Hardy's initial act of blackmail.
We must now take this web of illicit enterprise, blackmail, and infidelity and connect it directly back to the very reason Cropper was hired.
The trauma and subsequent suicide of Dr. Edmund Fox, which was triggered by the fatal connection involving his wife, Charity Fox.
Cropper, using information gleaned directly from EBS of quants, who saw the illegal brew as a rival to legitimate businesses, uncovered the truth about Redaway and Hardy's 120-proof moonshine.
Quants admitted that this high-proof liquor was common knowledge among the town's less respectable elements.
The story he pieced together is one of profound, compounding negligence. One evening, Charity Fox and her husband, Dr. Edmund Fox April's father, were drinking the illegal brew.
Charity suffered a sudden fit or coma. The appearance was so profound and sudden that she appeared dead.
And Dr. Edmund Fox, tragically, was also inebriated at the time. He made a professional misjudgment and pronounced his own wife dead when the police arrived.
Because of his partnership with Redaway and maybe a deep desire to bury his own catastrophic mistake as quickly as possible, Edmund Fox allowed the funeral director to take the body immediately.
No post-mortem was performed. Only 3 days elapsed before the burial service was scheduled. The funeral took place in the packed church, presided over by the blackmailer, Reverend Hardy.
And here is the moment of unparalleled public horror. The mourners followed the coffin to the churchyard. During the committal service, as Reverend Hardy was speaking, and the coffin was sitting right next to the excavated grave.
Muffled, distinct tapping was heard coming from inside the casket.
Oh my God.
It caused instant chaos. The source notes that a Mr. Biggins, a pallbearer, was the first one brave enough to step forward, pressing his ear directly against the wood.
The reality sunk in instantly.
They rushed to retrieve tools, unscrewed the casket, and opened it.
And the account of Charity Fox's face, alive but terrifying after having been locked in the dark, silent space, is horrific.
Edmund Fox collapsed instantly, overwhelmed by the realization of his terrible mistake. He had to be supported by 2 women.
The poor woman, having been poisoned by the illegal still liquor, had only appeared to be dead due to the deep coma induced by the high alcohol proof.
They rushed her to the hospital. She did recover briefly, surviving for a few days, but her underlying medical issues, compounded by the trauma, led to her condition worsening.
She eventually died of pneumonia. A post-mortem was finally performed then, confirming the complications.
The sheer trauma of this entire sequence, the illegal poison, the drunken doctor's catastrophic negligence, the rush to burial, and the public, terrifying realization that she was alive, it must have utterly consumed Dr. Edmund Fox.
This explains everything about April's initial gut feeling. The shame, the guilt, the absolute terror of exposure and professional ruin. It all led to his depression, his abandonment of his beloved walks, and ultimately his suicide.
He simply couldn't live with the memory of that tapping coming from the coffin.
This profound negligence, however, required witnesses.
It did. And this brings us back to the disturbing side plot that Cropper cleverly leveraged. Sam Ross, the 16-year-old trainee funeral arranger and gravedigger.
Sam is a tragic figure. He lived with his grandmother and was known for being clean-habited, but he had a fragile mental state.
Right. He believed he inherited a psychic gift after his twin sister Gillian drowned years ago. He was often seen holding his head and swaying, claiming he was receiving messages.
And Sam was present both at the funeral when Charity was nearly buried alive, and he was involved in the still operation, delivering supplies or assisting with distribution.
Cropper knew that someone this vulnerable would be the weak link. He found Sam's house and laid out the facts, not with malice, but with cold, hard reality.
He told Sam, essentially, that he was in this shit up to your eyeballs for conspiracy to manslaughter, and that Redaway, an older, more established criminal, would absolutely drag him down to save himself.
So Cropper gave him a stark choice. Help the prosecution by providing testimony against Redaway and Hardy, or face a hard prison sentence that would change him forever and leave his elderly grandmother unattended.
The pressure worked.
It did. Sam, terrified of the social shame and the thought of being incarcerated, eventually cooperated, providing crucial testament against his employers and the vicar.
Cropper showed a remarkable understanding of leverage here. He used Sam's fear and his familial duty, not just financial bribes, to crack the case open.
So while Cropper was building his case against Hardy and Redaway, he also had to follow the money and the local power structures.
This led him into the strange, secluded orbit of Mr. Michael Whitaker, the incredibly wealthy landowner of Pidrack Manor.
A magnificent 350-year-old Jacobean building.
Whitaker represented the pinnacle of local wealth, but he was a deeply troubled man. He was extremely obese, reportedly weighing 33 stone.
And he suffered from crippling hypochondriasis and intense anxiety, specifically centered on the fate of his own body after death. He was caught between choosing modern cremation versus traditional burial.
His fears were obsessive. He worried about being interred in the cold mausoleum next to his deceased wife, Teresa, and rotting away to dust.
But his mental decline was rooted in a very real physical ailment, as his adopted daughter, Prudence, later revealed to April. Whitaker was suffering from a declining mental state due to a neurological disease, a mass on his brain.
And this mass likely explained his increasingly bizarre and humiliating behavior.
The sources detail how Whitaker forced service workers, including the milkman, the breadman, and notably Redaway, to join him naked in his private pool.
Naked. He made them get in the pool naked.
Naked. He saw this as a strange test of character, loyalty, or possibly humility.
And Redaway's reaction to this bizarre demand.
Redaway outright refused. He stated that it was a profound departure from the seriousness he expected when discussing grave matters.
So by refusing this humiliating ritual, Redaway lost the opportunity for Whitaker's immensely lucrative future business.
He did, which highlights how highly he valued his perceived dignity, even over desperately needed income. Prudence confided in April that many people, desperate to keep their contracts, did submit to the humiliation.
So we have the still operation exposed, the blackmailer identified, the near-burial catastrophe linked to the suicide, and a wealthy hypochondriac landowner. But Cropper still hadn't answered the central underlying question.
Why did Reverend Hardy choose that specific secret to blackmail Mary? He needed to dig deeper into the genealogical past.
While the still operation was the physical crime, the moral crime was rooted in the family secrets.
Exactly. Cropper, relentless in his pursuit of truth, consulted the parish registers in Torquay and then expanded his search to the county archives in Plymouth. And the result was a genealogical revelation so complex and deeply shocking that it surprised even a man who had seen the worst of London's underworld.
Okay, let's unpack this ultimate discovery slowly, because this is where all the previously separated threads snap together into one massive, incestuous knot. Who did Cropper discover?
He discovered the truth about Redaway's illegitimate child, but went much further. He found that Alice Redaway, the unhappy wife of the criminal funeral director, had twin daughters out of wedlock.
And the father of these twins was Crispin Kirby, the handsome stonemason. Alice was only 15 at the time of their conception.
And both children were immediately given up for adoption.
Wait, Crispin Kirby, the man currently sleeping with Mary Hardy, is the biological father of Alice Redaway's twin daughters. And Alice is married to the man who employed Kirby and is Mary Hardy's biological father.
Exactly. But get this, it gets much tighter. Cropper found the adoption records. One twin was adopted by the Fox family.
Dr. April Fox.
Dr. April Fox, the very client who hired him and whose quest for truth started this whole investigation.
And the second twin?
The other twin was adopted by the Whitakers. Prudence Whitaker, the adopted daughter of the wealthy, hypochondriac landowner Michael Whitaker, whose health April had been monitoring.
So April and Prudence, brought together by fate through April's investigation into her adoptive father's suicide, are actually biological twin sisters. This is a staggering coincidence.
But the horrifying synthesis doesn't end there. Let's just map the connections verbally so the listener can trace the rot.
Please.
Their biological mother is Alice Redaway, married to Ken Redaway, the man responsible for the still and the near-burial catastrophe. Their biological father is Crispin Kirby, the stonemason.
Okay, now let's incorporate Mary Hardy into this graphic.
Mary Hardy, the vicar's wife, is Redaway's illegitimate daughter, the very child Hardy blackmailed her over. This means Mary is the twin sister's half-sister.
Good grief. And the relationship web tightens even further.
Oh, it does. Mary was so desperate for affection that she pursued two men. Crispin Kirby, who is her half-sister's biological father.
And Abiasef Quantz, the crematorium owner, who is her half-sister's maternal uncle, Alice Redaway's brother.
This entire community is living inside a self-contained, geometrically awful and incestuous nightmare.
It is truly grotesque.
The town, perceived as tranquil and proper, was just a petri dish for moral decay. When Mary finally learned that Quantz was Alice Redaway's brother, thus making him her uncle-in-law, she was utterly overwhelmed by the revelation of her compromised relationships.
She vomited violently.
She did. The psychological weight of that realization that every single connection she made seeking freedom was inherently tainted by the secrets of her past was devastating. This explains why Cropper, a man used to the open depravity of London, remarked that he had never known a case to be so enmeshed with so many other factors. He referred to the area as incestuous because the rot was entirely internal.
And this level of complexity is why a typical police inquiry would have failed. They would have seen a suicide and maybe a small-time bootlegging operation. They wouldn't have uncovered the decades of careful blackmail and the shocking family structure beneath it all.
Cropper's impartiality and his focus on genealogical records were the only tools that could cut through this communal deception.
Once Cropper possessed this overwhelming stack of facts, the still, the near burial, the blackmail, the genealogical disaster, he knew they couldn't just hand the dossier to the local authorities.
Right. The secret needed to be publicly exposed to prevent further obfuscation or political compromise. He advised Dr. Fox to set the cat among the pigeons.
And April, having realized her own traumatic parentage and the extent of the betrayal against her adopted father, embraced the role of the avenging angel.
She found Redaway and Reverend Hardy speaking quietly, as they always did, in the snug of the hole-in-the-wall pub. She sat down with them, utterly composed, her lips pressed into a straight line, and she systematically detailed everything.
She went through the crimes in order: the illegal still, the poisonous high-proof alcohol, the near death of her mother, and the resulting guilt and coercion that led to her adoptive father's death.
She made it clear that they were responsible for negligent homicide.
But then she delivered the final blow. She looked directly at Redaway, who was still trying to process the still revelation, and revealed the family secret he had buried for decades.
Mary Hardy, the vicar's wife, was his illegitimate daughter.
And then she drove the knife in further, revealing that Reverend Hardy, his drinking partner, had blackmailed Mary into marriage using that very secret.
And Redaway was genuinely shocked. He had no knowledge of Mary's identity. His question to the vicar, a choked, desperate plea of "you don't know," was absolute proof of his ignorance regarding that layer of Hardy's manipulation. April had exposed the mutual betrayal.
April walked out, and moments later, the smug quiet of the pub was shattered.
The sounds of breaking glass, swearing, and shouting filled the evening air. The secret that had held Torquay captive for generations was finally out, and the communal facade was irreversibly shattered.
The consequences for the local power structure were immediate and comprehensive.
Oh, yeah. The scandal broke in the local newspaper with such force that the paper ordered a second edition to satisfy the unprecedented demand. This was public immorality involving deeply trusted local figures.
A vicar and a funeral director.
Detectives and a woman constable had to be brought in from Exeter to handle the complex investigation, as the local police force was clearly compromised or just unable to handle the scope of the charges.
Redaway and Reverend Hardy were soon indicted for negligent homicide and multiple Licensing Act violations. They were immediately remanded in custody.
The public outrage against Hardy was severe. Someone defaced the church's front door with white paint, scrawling words the local newspaper refused to print, symbolizing the utter collapse of faith in the man of God.
And Sam Ross, the young, traumatized trainee Cropper had leveraged, he faced his own reckoning.
He was prosecuted for conspiracy related to the still. But shockingly, women also came forward with accusations of indecent exposure spanning several years. This secondary prosecution had a devastating effect on his grandmother, who was hospitalized from the shock and shame.
It just showed that the underlying rot in the town infected people at every social stratum.
It did. But the ultimate victim in all this was Mary Hardy. Her liberation came at the cost of her fragile sanity. She fell into a profound and crippling clinical depression.
Not only did she have to process her freedom from Hardy, but she had to accept that Redaway was her biological father and that she had unknowingly slept with her half-sister's biological father and her half-sister's maternal uncle.
Her fragile state collapsed completely. We mentioned the physical manifestation of her despair, the vomiting. She was eventually moved to a quiet sanatorium near Plymouth to begin the painful process of recovery away from the toxic environment that had nearly destroyed her.
Let's track the long-term fates of the other key players. Mr. Whitaker, the wealthy hypochondriac.
He eventually died of his neurological illness. April noted his death was due to terminal secretions. His adopted daughter, Prudence, inherited the estate.
But she quickly decided to sell Pedrack Manor and move to London. She saw her immense wealth as a barrier in the smaller, judgmental town where her family history was now public knowledge.
Which is understandable. But the story does end with a remarkable moment of reconciliation for the newly discovered family.
April and Prudence reconciled with their biological mother, Alice Redaway.
Yes. Alice finally confessed the shame, fear, and abuse she suffered when they were born when she was only 15. The twin sisters accepted their biological connection and stood by Alice, eventually meeting their biological father, Crispin Kirby,
who reappeared in their lives and even attended the christening of Mr. Biggins's baby.
a small sign of normalcy returning.
As for the convicted criminals, Redaway proved to be a model prisoner.
He received a reduced sentence for cooperation and was released on license in 1960. The stipulation was firm. He was never to set foot in the Torquay area again. His funeral business was taken over and his house sold off, eradicating his presence entirely.
Reverend Hardy, however, gave us a truly cinematic finale.
He did.
Yeah.
While being transferred to another jail, he managed to escape along with 2 other inmates. A frantic nationwide manhunt failed to locate him.
It wasn't until 4 years later, in 1957, that he resurfaced. He was apprehended in Luanda, Angola, on the waterfront.
And what was he doing in Angola?
The sources confirm he was doing exactly what he had done in Torquay, selling illegal, high-proof alcohol on the waterfront.
You can't make this up.
He was drunk when they found him, assaulted a police officer by kicking him, and then just vanished into the notorious Angolan prison system.
A sense of grim, poetic justice. A man who used illegal liquor to prey on his community met his final fate due to the exact same addiction and crime in a far-flung land.
And what became of Mary Hardy, the woman who was finally free?
In a surprising turn, she refused a marriage proposal from Constable Babbage, a man who had admired her since school and saw her as a tragic figure who needed protection.
Mary refused.
She was determined to live off her recovered money, refusing to be looked after by a man again. She intentionally snubbed Henry Taylor, the obsessed mortuary attendant, ensuring her distance from every toxic element of her previous life. She remained small and quiet, but found a new, quiet determination.
Wow. We began this deep dive with a single traumatic suicide, expecting to uncover maybe a small financial malfeasance. And instead, we found an unprecedented web of complexity. A tranquil seaside town had been slowly fermenting a lifetime of secrets, financial crime, blackmail spanning generations, and a horrifically interwoven, incestuous family structure hidden in plain sight.
All detonated by the sheer will of a daughter seeking the truth.
Cropper himself reflected on this, comparing the job to his usual London cases. He came down expecting a quick job involving a few bribes and simple facts, anticipating a 3-day paid vacation.
Instead, he encountered a plot as thick as black treacle, requiring a forensic dive into the soul of the community. Torquay, with its sparkling sea views and polite populace, proved to be far more corrupt and required greater vigilance than the overtly criminal, crimey streets of East London he was accustomed to.
The case was a masterclass not just in detection, but in forensic genealogy and character analysis. It showed how impartiality and relentless inquiry can expose deeply buried communal rot.
So what does this entire intricate story mean for you, the listener?
The source material leaves Mr. Cropper relaxing finally in his London office. He's surrounded by the roar and smoke of traffic, but he closes his eyes and remembers the peaceful salt air of Torquay, the distant horizon, and the sound of the crashing waves.
And this raises the essential question we have to leave you with. Which environment truly demands more vigilance from its inhabitants? Is it the sprawling, chaotic city where crime is open, expected, and the villains are obvious on the surface?
Or is it the beautiful, tranquil small town where lies, secrets, and infidelity can ferment undisturbed under the polite gaze of the populace for decades until a desperate outsider is finally called in to expose the terrible, incestuous truth? Think about the secrets your own quiet community might be hiding until our next deep dive.